I'm Leslie Edwards, one of 6 clinical systems trainer here at Credamsey at Fort Hood, Texas. For the next 10 or 15 minutes, I'd like to introduce you to the current encounter. I'm going to give you a thorough overview of that current encounter. This morning, I'm going to explain the purpose of the patient encounter module. I'm going to describe the current encounter screen. I'm going to set the encounter summary properties. We'll be updating the current encounter using AutoCite. And finally, we're going to print the current encounter. I've been here at Credamsey since 1984. I've had the privilege and honor of learning these clinical systems. I've been actually on the deployment of CIS in 1994, and for about the last 5 years, I've used AHLTA. The current encounter is commonly referred to as the electronic SF600. The AHLTA encounter design is based on and replaces the paper SF600. The SF600 in its paper form presented quite a few problems. Some of the problems that we encountered were not legible documentation, the paper would get lost, the paper would become a file 13, the paper would ultimately be destroyed in some form or fashion. As a soldier, I've had access to my paper medical records. If there was something in my medical records that I didn't want anybody to see or didn't particularly want others reading that, I would extract that information out of my paper medical records and I would ball it up and throw it into the trash. With AHLTA being a global system, we're one step closer to achieving true continuity of care. One good thing about electronic documentation, that electronic documentation doesn't go anywhere and it gives us clear, concise, understandable, readable, legible documentation. I'd like to introduce you to the current encounter. We'll be going to the AHLTA training system, and you'll find directly underneath the appointments tab, you'll see listed all the appointments for today. We're going to select Eduardo Suarez. We're going to locate his name on the appointment list. We're going to single click it. And once we single clicked his name, we're going to go to the action bar. We're going to go to the open appointment icon, and this will open his encounter. Once the encounter is open, we see quite a bit of information. We're going to go from top to bottom, and we're going to go from left to right. Directly at the very top of the screen, you'll see some grayed out information. This will display the patient's appointment time and date. It's also going to display the appointment type. It will display the treatment facility, the treatment clinic, the primary provider on this visit, and also it's going to let us know that this is an outpatient visit. Directly underneath that information, you will come to our very first module called AutoCites. AutoCites display information that is already known about the patient. You'll see here that what's displayed is problems and allergies. Now, one of the things with problems being displayed up front is if you have a patient that's been in the system since the inception of AHLTA in 2004, and they've had a lot of visits, they're going to have their problems listed all up front underneath this AutoCites module. I've actually seen encounters that house problems that it elongated the encounter and made it difficult for us to get to the next screening module. Now, we'll be able to set the encounter properties at a little later time. Some of the other modules that are accessible from the encounter screen are the screening module. We have the vitals module. We have the subjective and the objective. We also have the drawing module. Now, we're not going to cover the drawing module today. However, if you're interested in the drawing module and what it offers, we can give you additional training on a one-on-one basis to explore that particular module. We'll also go over the assessment and plan module. We'll be going over the disposition, and finally, we'll go over add a note. Those are the components that make up the encounter module. So what we're going to do now is set up the encounter summary properties. We're going to utilize this open encounter at Eduardo Suarez to actually set those properties. What we'll do now is go to the action bar and we're going to click on the options icon. Once we click on the options icon, it's going to display our encounter summary properties. Once these are set, these will display for every single encounter that we access. The first 3 lines are for our signature block. Line 1 is a field that you cannot change. That's for your legal name. Line 2 features the ability to input your role or your title. Now, AHLTA does come with a default. That default will say Physician Workstation. So you're going to have to change that. So if you're a nurse, you'll change it to nurse. If you're a physician's assistant, you'll change it to physician's assistant. Whatever your official role or title or profession, that's listed in line 2. Line 3 features your location. That location could be Fort Sam Houston, Fort Hood, Fort Sill, whatever your present clinic and location, that's to be entered into line 3. If you are an intern, a student, or a resident, you also have the ability to assign a cosigner or your preceptor. For auto site preferences, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but as you can see, there's quite a few options here. Remember again that they will display for every single encounter. If you're using the Tri-Service workflow form, you will set only allergies as your property to display for auto sites. For vitals, labs, and rads, we don't select any of those at all because it'll bring every single vital, lab, and rad for every single patient encounter. For the AP, we encourage you to select show active orders. You can also do that for lab and radiology. When you're in the assessment and plan, it's going to give you a summarized view of all the active orders for your patient. For the subjective and objective default, we do want you to select automatically convert ROS to HPI. That's review of systems to the history of present illness. And we don't want you to select merge DX prompt with default template because we don't have a default template. For disposition follow-up discussion, there's an automatic default of patient. For everything that you detail for a patient's visit, you want to select the person that you gave that information to. Almost always it's the patient. However, there is a drop down where you can select legal guardian, sibling, spouse, whatever is applicable, that's what you'll select. For the Enum Calculator, there's a default of outpatient visit. But if you're in a behavioral health specialty, you may want your default to always go to 99499. That 99499 can be selected off the drop-down list for other enlisted. For auto print, we don't want you to select that because every time that you sign the patient's encounter, it's going to automatically print off. For sensitive, if you're in a behavioral health specialty, you may want that defaulted for every encounter. You also have the option to identify an encounter as sensitive during disposition. Include ICD-9 and CPT-4 codes. We ask that you select that. We also want you to select warn me if no procedure documented. That's an alert to the provider. And automatically save, we don't select that. There's an automatic feature in AHLTA already. You can also choose to save an encounter by the action bar. Now that we set all of our summary encounter properties, do I have any questions at all? Finally, the last thing that I want to do for you today is print a current encounter. We're going to access the menu bar this time. I want you to click on File, select Print, and this will allow us to print our current encounter. We covered quite a bit of information during this session. In summary, we learned how to open and update a patient encounter. We learned to set the encounter summary properties, and we learned to print a current encounter. Do I have any questions over anything that I've discussed during this session? Thank you for your time.